Welcome to the Flower Prophecies, a podcast exploring all things flower essences and remedies and flower therapy, and how this vibrational plant medicine has the potential to heal and shift our individual and collective health and consciousness. We'll be diving deep into the specifics of individual essences, nature's energetics, emotional healing and growth, as well as hearing client case studies, hosting special guests and professionals, and I'll be sharing my own personal explorations and philosophies channeled straight from the flowers. Through my own unearthing, I have discovered what I believe to be the most profound teaching of the flowers, and I now wish to share with you the practice of alchemizing fear into beauty. So welcome back to the Flower Prophecies. Today we are talking with Heidi Merika. She is a naturopath, a herbalist, and an educator. A passionate wildcrafter, she has authored 2 books now on the enchanting world of foraging and wild medicine. Connecting with and being sustained through nature from a young child, Heidi herself now educates others on how to regain their trust in nature and the knowing that everything they need is provided through it. So welcome, Heidi. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Abby. Thanks so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Beautiful. So let's start with your personal story. I found it so fascinating to read about how you grew up with a gypsy mother and traveled around a lot, living from the land at times. Could you share with us a bit about your childhood and how you learnt to sustain yourself with what nature provided around you?
Yeah, so it was a very chaotic, I guess, upbringing. Lots of change. I think my sister and I sat down one day and counted how many schools we went to, and I think we came up with 17. There was some we couldn't even remember the actual name. It was just like, that one that was then, so it was, lots of chopping and changing. And even to this day, sometimes in our family, we're like, when did things happen? Trying to establish timelines of when things actually happened and what actually happened, because it was just so much change and movement that it all gets a bit hard to put the pieces together sometimes. But, we lived in so many different situations, share houses and squats and tents sometimes. And we went to India at one point when I was about 11, and we're just living in a community up in the Dharamsala and the foothills of the Himalayas. And and often my mum would just find it really hard in society. She had a lot of issues of her own, and, society would get really hard for her to handle. And so her solace was always found in nature. And we never even had a car. With all that travel, we never had a car as I was growing up either. So all that travel was done by hitchhiking. So we just hitchhiked everywhere. And Mum would do this thing where she would find on the map where a river intersected with the road, and then we would hitchhike to that point on the map and then get out of the car, and then we would walk for several hours or, most of the day up the river until we were just in a completely isolated spot, and then we would just set up camp there. In the 80s you could do that. Private property wasn't as as strict. I think, people just had a lot more property and it wasn't as guarded as it is now. So it was kind of possible to do that then in the late 70s, early 80s when we were doing that sort of stuff. But so when I was 7 or 8, we moved from Sydney, moving around sort of Sydney, northern New South Wales to Tasmania. And in Tasmania, my mum started a botany degree. at the uni down there. And so she was learning a lot about plants down there and which plants were edible. And so she was teaching us different things that she was learning about, what plants could be eaten and how you could sustain yourself in the wilderness and things like that. So a lot of that was being incorporated on our camping trips. And but even before then, because even in my new book, From the Wild, which is coming out in September, I've got a story in there that takes place when we were only 3 or 4. We were camping on someone's property in northern New South Wales, and even then we were eating thistles. We're catching yabbies out of the creek and eating thistles out of the paddock. And Mum had just made some cottage cheese from some milk that she'd got from the dairy farmer whose land we were camping on, and things like that. So
wow, what an incredible childhood. Like, I'm sure, as you say, it was very chaotic at times and kind of unsettling, but so unique and so much, diversity in growing up in that way.
Pros and cons. And cons.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
But there was a sense of trust in the world that I got out of that I'm really drawing on now a lot in my work. So
that's beautiful. I'm sure that you'll have, takeaways from it for forever, and, reflections on certain elements of that upbringing with everything that you move through forever.
Very formative.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you're now a naturopath and medicinal herbalist, but you've also obviously found this deep passion for harvesting plants from the wild for their medicinal and nutritional nature. Was this something that you sort of took from this upbringing, or was there other elements within your experience that kind of added to this passion for it?
For naturopathy or
for wild harvesting and sort of wild crafting?
Yeah, so there were a few elements that played into that journey. So when I studied in Melbourne at the Southern School of Natural Therapies, and at the time that I was studying, which was the late 90s, I graduated in 2000, so it was sort of between 95 and 2000. It was like we were changing from the diploma to a bachelor degree, and we were trying to get in the industry the scientific, recognition. So it went like herbalism had been very much sort of home herbalist community, like this very grassroots kind of herbalism that, was popular in the 60s and 70s with the hippies and the counterculture and things like that. But by that time in the 90s, so started in the 80s, and then definitely by the end of the 90s, we were really trying to prove our mettle as a profession and get taken seriously. It's like we're not just a bunch of hippies, brewing herbs in Belgium. What I am now. But we were trying to really, make tinctures that were standardized, and, companies like MediHerb and, all these nutraceutical companies, were flourishing, that were making really high quality, like some of the highest quality herbal medicines in the world. And they still hold that place. Like we have really high quality medicine here. And, but the paradigm had really swung into this sort of scientific, standardized. What was being promoted then was everything was like researched, evidence-based, and anything a bit woo-woo and a bit sort of, grassrootsy was sort of almost disdained a bit in favor of this medical model. And certainly when we were taught to use, not to make tinctures or to go out and forage plants. We were taught to use, the tinctures from the companies. You buy your stuff, you buy your supplements, you buy your tinctures and all of that. So it was really more of a sort of herbal pharmacy, really. And herbal medicine as I see it now, which is related to plants.
Yeah.
And so that was the paradigm and really the gold standard for your practice at that time was that you finish school, you go out, you set yourself up in a clinic, you stock your clinic with this massive dispensary of products. And then, you see your patients and you sell them all these products. And anything that didn't really fit that model was kind of like if you weren't that, you'd failed. And really struggled for years to try and fit that mold. But I was just like trying to put, a square peg in a round hole. Like I just couldn't ever really pull that off. But another thing that happened, so that was the thing, that was sort of the milieu that I came out of graduating into. And then after I'd been out for several years, probably like 5 years or even maybe more, I met a woman at a meditation group that I was a part of who had really advanced breast cancer. And she didn't want to treat it with normal medicines. She didn't want any chemo or anything like that. She didn't even want to use supplements or herbal supplements or, nutraceuticals or anything like that. All she wanted to use was the plants that were growing in her backyard and meditation. And so she knew I was a herbalist and naturopath. So she said, I'll come to my house and see what's in the backyard and tell me what I can use. And at that time, I was so disconnected from the actual plants because I was just so used to using products. And so I went into her backyard, and the sad thing is that now, probably 20 years later, I know that there was stuff in her backyard that she could have used, and she could have really used quite a lot of stuff that was in there. But at the time, I just didn't know. And there was like 2 or 3 plants that I recognized in her backyard. And they weren't ones that I recognized from my studies. They were ones that I recognized from my childhood. And it was like, oh, I know these plants. I have like this direct personal relationship with these plants. But what happened out of that is I took all these samples from her backyard and I was like, well, I'll find out. I'll ask around. So I took them to nurseries and said, what are these plants? What are they called? What do they do? And started learning what these weeds that grow in people's backyard were called and what they did. Unfortunately, it ended up being too late for her and she did actually pass away. But it wasn't, I didn't see her death as a failure because she was so in control of what she was doing and she just fully chose how she lived and how she died and her whole process and like her spiritual development in that time was phenomenal. I'm getting emotional talking about it, but and also it set me also on a path that has then been shared with hundreds, thousands of people.
Yeah.
So, there was this power in her process that is still, the ripples of that are still being felt in the world today. So, it's really, amazing these little events at the time. We don't realise the significance of them. So that started me on a process of like looking around me in my immediate environment and just asking, what's this? What can it do? What's this? What can it do? And so not long after that, we moved from Melbourne to the Sunshine Coast. And then I was still in that mindset of learning all the plants around me. And so I just, would set myself this task of knowing all the plants in my backyard, and then all the plants, not all of them, because, there's so many plants, what was around me in my backyard and in my, radius when I would do walks around my house. And just kept asking what things were, and like going into PubMed and looking at the research. Once I could find a Latin name, I could then look up the Latin binomial and find research from all over the world. And what I would find consistently, that a lot of this research on these plants, these wild edibles and the weeds, would come out of countries like Africa or India or these third world countries, where they were really relying on these plants as primary food sources. And there was actually really, massive amounts of really well-researched data on there that I just gave, a lot of that research is in wildcraft and from the wild as well. So yeah, so that was kind of the journey. And then I started, I was teaching when I first started doing my wildcraft courses up here on the Sunshine Coast. I was teaching at Endeavour College at the time too. And I was seeing in some of my students the same thing, they were just being trained in, products. And so I was like, well, do you guys want to actually learn some plants? Let's go out in the fields and, go out in the bush and spend the weekend harvesting plants and learning plants. So I started running the wildcraft courses up here, I think in maybe 2015 or something like that. So with, mainly it was my students in the early days, and then just more and more people as time went on. But so that was, and that just, and like, finally, when I started doing that, I finally felt like, after years and years of feeling like I was really bad, like wondering like what was amiss really in my chosen path, it just always just flowed with ease and just felt like so comfortable and just felt like home to me. It was almost effortless and so enjoyable. And whereas my naturopathic practice always just felt like a bit of a struggle. So yeah, it was interesting. It was kind of like, this is my path. This is what this is what it was all about. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. But it looked so different to what anyone else in my industry was doing at the time. So it kind of just felt like, and I was just making it up, all my courses, all my information. I wasn't, there are some really good books on weeds and foraging now, but at the time when I started doing, there wasn't a lot of material around, and a lot of the material, because I was wanting to work with the plants in my own environment, I was just sort of learning them from scratch myself. So I wasn't relying on anyone else's roadmap to do that. So there was a lot of fear and doubt and second guessing and all of that along the way as well. But just kept building on that and building on that as well.
Yeah. What a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. And just, like you say, what an incredible gift that within this experience with that woman, it enabled you to step into your path and what it is that you're meant to be sharing with the world, and now how many people you've shared that with, which is just so incredible. And I also, I think it's there's such a key sort of I guess, notion in there of working with the plants in your backyard. And, you know, that was so important to her, that it was within her backyard. And I think that's something that we are quite disconnected from. It's like usually what we require is in our environment, is in our sort of accessible environment, you know. And so it's like, if we have this information that you're so passionate about sharing, a lot more of us would be able to sort of help ourselves, you know.
Totally.
Beautiful.
That's the thing. And I read this book, and I need to find out, because I quote this quote all the time, and I need to find out who said it. It was a woman in a book about women herbalists from around the world, and the quote was, and it stopped me in my tracks, was, "The best herb to use is the one you have."
Yes.
And that, I think there is so much power in that simple statement. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
We get so caught up. I think we're such a consumerist culture, but we don't realize that we apply that same endless striving and consuming. We do it with knowledge as well, and
Yes.
we think that we have to know more and more and more and more. And so, you know, at a certain point, I sort of really sort of got comfortable with the fact of knowing what I know. And these 33 plants that were in wildcraft, I was like, well, these are my plants. These are my plants that I'm working with in this lifetime. And sure, I know more plants than that. But these are the ones that I go really, really deep with over many, many, many years, and that I connect with on other planes. And so I got really comfortable with my body of knowledge. And I think if you look at traditional healers and shamans, they would have their core group of plants that they would work with. And I think at a certain point, if you're actually working with plants, you go, okay, this is my tribe, rather than just having to prove something by just trying to know every plant under the sun.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that so much. And that really resonates for me as well, with the whole, feeling out of your realm, with like seeking out all this information and trying to like learn because of this is how others have said, you know, this is the way, right? And it's returning back to just knowing that, you know, you will know what is for you and what's not for you. And you speak of, you know, these core plants and the tribe, like you say, which is, it's literally like your tribe of like your support team, right? You speak of like connecting to them on these other realms as well. And in your book, there's a lot about, you know, the energetic qualities of the plants along with the rest of their like actions as well. So I'd love if you could share how this plays into your work, and if it's considered with each client, like this energetic realm of the plants.
Yeah, it kind of, and I'm not actually practicing as a herbalist at the moment. I stopped my clinical practice. I separated from my longtime partner and moved into a new house, and my practice was at the old house, and I didn't feel to start a new one. So I'm not actually practicing at the moment. I'm mainly teaching and writing and doing that stuff.
For yourself then, even? For
myself and my family. And when I was working with clients, it would really depend. There was no sort of hard and fast rules about it. I kind of work quite organically, and when something just felt really strongly indicated, then I'd go, you need this, and it would just jump out, and it would be really obvious. And then other times, you know, not so much. Maybe, you know, sometimes I would even default just into that more pharmaceutical mode and just use supplements or just, you know, standardized tinctures or things like that. So every case, I guess, was different depending on the person and the plan and the situation. So they would just come in and out very organically as they they would, as it was called for, I guess.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd share a little story. So within my own support team of plants, one of them that has that kind of almost like kickstarted this journey for me as well, is Gotu-Kola. And and I had such a deep connection with it. And then, you know, I was also given your book, Wildcraft, and every single time I opened it up, it was to Gotu-Kola. And you know, I was just like always connecting with it. And I would use it in my food, and I would, you know, dry and make teas from it and stuff. But one day I decided that I was going to make a flower essence from it, which was the first sort of plant essence, because I was just using the leaves of it that I made. And I decided to. I know I had read your book and your sort of description of its properties and the energetic properties, but I had kind of like forgotten about it and like kind of pushed it to the side. And I thought I'm just going to create this essence and see what it brings up. And it was like the most intense, like wildest sort of experience and like healing. And it's like, I think this was like 6 months ago, and it's still just like so deeply like unfolding for me. But it wasn't until like 2 weeks after, when I had all of this stuff sort of unfold, I was like, it was a very karmic sort of experience. And I was like, hang on a second. And I went back to your book, and every single thing that it was that it touched on was just like so on point of like what was unfolding for me. So it was very it was very aligned and very synchronistic.
That's so interesting that you say that, because I had the exact same experience when I wrote the book, and with one of my teachers, because I had done some work, because like I said, I'd always sort of struggled a bit with that naturopathy mold of doing the clinical practice and stuff. And I gave it up. I gave it up a few times and then went back to it. And one of those times I'd sort of decided to give it up. But then I found a teacher, Pam Montgomery, a US herbalist who wrote the book Plant Spirit Healing. And someone just contacted me, beautiful girl, Juliet from far north Queensland, contacted me out of the blue and said, can we bring Pam Montgomery to Australia to teach us? And I was like, oh, wow, that would be amazing, because I'd just read Plant Spirit Healing, and I was like, oh, this is, and it just felt like such a missing piece of the puzzle of working with plants. And I'd had my own experience energetically with plants, but they were really erratic, and Pam's work sort of offered a way to have those experiences more consistently and more be able to tap into it more easily. And so I was really like, it just felt like a really missing piece of the puzzle for me. And then after doing her work, I went back to my practice with a whole different energetic component to it. But there was this whole story, sort of like a big story that'll wind back around to this point. So what happened is I did this training with Pam. We did get her here. I'd just been to a conference with American herbalist Matthew Wood, who's an amazing herbalist, and he'd been brought out here by a beautiful woman called Naniva. And so when Juliet contacted me and said, can we get Pam here? I was like, all right, I'll contact Naniva. She got Matthew Wood here. We'll see if she can get Pam here, which she did. And so we did this 10-day intensive training, which was amazing. Like every day was just like magic, like literally. And that was really powerful training. And then she went back to America, and then a year or two later, she was going to come back to Australia to do an initiation, a plant initiation. And we were going to be doing this initiation with Tulsi, basil. And so we had this meeting with Pam via Zoom, and she was like, okay, Heidi, can you make, in the initiation, all you do, you fast for like 3 days, and all you do is you drink this elixir of the plant, and then you do all these processes, like spiritual processes to like incorporate that plant and its teaching. But the creation of the elixir takes months before the actual ceremony. And so I had to like go and like I found this Tulsi plant in the Karoi Community Garden. No, not the Karoi, Yandina Community Gardens. And I was like meditating with her, and you make a flower essence of the plant, and then you make a tincture with like the roots and stem and leaves and flowers. So all the parts of the plant are in there, and then the flower essence as well, and then you make a big batch of tea as well, and sort of you combine the tincture and the tea and the flower essence, and it's this whole thing, and then you do like this stirring, like the biodynamic, where you go in one direction and then the other direction. It's this whole sort of like magic potion, literally, that takes months. And you throughout that time you're like meditating with the elixir as well, and charging it. I had this, at the time I was making it, I had this massive stone spiral that I'd created in the backyard out of river rocks, and like you could walk through it, and then there was all these crystals in the middle, so I was making it in this massive spiral crystal grid, and it was this whole thing. And so I was really excited about this initiation with Tulsi, and then as the time came, it was like a few days out from going to the initiation, my youngest daughter, who was about, I think, 8 at the time, fell out of a tree and broke both her arms. And so she was in these 2 casts, she couldn't feed herself, dress herself, anything. So I just couldn't leave her at the time. And I was devastated, but I was like, oh, I can't come to the initiation. I'll just give you guys the tincture. And because there was someone else from up here going, I was like, I'll give it to her to take down. And and I'm just going to have to stay here. But what I thought is, I'll do the journey here by myself. I'll just keep some of the elixir and I'll do it here by myself while you guys are doing it down there. And so, I was sort of meditating on what does it mean that I can't go? Like, and I sort of came up with this thing, like the message was that it was really easy for me to go into circle with women and to have made these elixirs and be like a teacher's pet and be told what to do from Pam. Like, that was all very comfortable for me. But what was really challenging for me is to not know what to do, to not be included in the group. Like to have to do it on my own was like just brought up all this abandonment and FOMO and like I can't, I'm going to do it wrong, and all of this stuff, which was really challenging, which was all where my growth needed to be. And so I was like, okay, this is it. This is the message. And then they all went to the thing. I had my elixir on the day it was meant to start. I was doing the stirring. You got to stir it, and I made the tea and made it all up in this big jar, and I was doing the stirred one, there was, I can't remember how many times, a certain number of times in each direction. And then I finished the stirring, and then I went to turn around to get a cup to put it in, because you have like a 15 ml amount, and I knocked the jar. And the whole thing just smashed all over the floor, the whole elixir. So not only could I not go to the initiation, I couldn't even, this elixir that I'd spent months preparing, I couldn't even have like a single drop of it. like it was smashed, covered in glass.
Wow.
And I had like literally just a full-blown tantrum meltdown, like crying, swearing, and like, Tulsi fucking hates me. Like, like, this whole thing, like, I'm not worthy and she doesn't like me and blah, blah, blah. And it was like, I give up, I'm not going to do anything. And then it was just like in the days that followed, it was like this total disillusionment of self. And I didn't even realize that one of the things they were doing on the initiation was this ceremony where you dress up and then you take all these layers off, and it's a dissolution of self.
Yes.
But I was like totally emotionally, mentally, spiritually going through that process in the days following. Like, well, I was just like, well, I can't do this. Am I a herbalist? Am I even meant to be a herbalist? Who am I? I'm not meant to work with plants. I don't even know who I am anymore. And I was just like, okay, I just need to be here, be present with my daughter. And so I let go of any thoughts about herbs, herbalism, anything to do with anything, and just focused on her and being a mum, and just let this whole thing just drop away and into this state of complete sort of surrender. And it's like, I don't even know what to do anymore. So I just let it all go. And but then what happened about 4 or 5 days after that is I had, like years before that, when I was still in Melbourne, I'd been initiated by a spiritual master into a particular meditation technique. And I'd done that for many years, but I'd sort of like let that practice sort of fall aside a bit. And I'd been doing a lot of Pam's work and sort of spiritual practices and stuff, and, and other stuff that I'd sort of learned along the way, new stuff. But I hadn't been doing that particular meditation practice, and I'd been kind of struggling with that sort of disciplined meditation practice. And then quite spontaneously, after a few days after the Tulsi smashed, I just woke up really early one morning, like 5 o'clock in the morning, and I just started meditating with that practice. Really strong. It was like the strongest meditation I'd had in years. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I just, did the meditation for the allotted time. And then the next day it happened again. I just woke up spontaneously, just started doing the meditation, really strong practice. And it just kind of kept happening for a few weeks, where this practice came back stronger than ever and easier than ever to do it. And I realized that Tulsi had been like, because Tulsi is all about like God, and, like she's the goddess in physical form, and she really puts us onto our correct path, I think, spiritually. And so she had been like, no, you have your spiritual path. Get back on it. Get back to where you're meant to be. This is your path. This is what you're meant to be doing. You know what to do. Just, bloody do it, and stop all this fluffing around and, trying to be someone else and trying to be Pam, trying to be, someone that you're not. You are you, and this is your path. Just get up and do the work. And so she knocked me literally, brutally back onto my spiritual path. So I got back into this meditation technique, which is a very sort of strong meditation technique. And then what happened was a few weeks after that, I was writing Wildcraft at the time, and it didn't have any of the plant spirit stuff in it at that time. I was just doing the research and stuff, and a friend of mine went away and said, we're going to go away. We've got an empty house. Do you want to come to my place and work on your book? So you've just got like, clear space. And I was like, yeah, that would be amazing. And so I went to her house and to work on the book, and I set myself up with my computer in the lounge room and stuff, and, had my research, all set up and everything. And I was like, got a whole house to myself. It was like, this is so cool. I was like, I'll just go and do a little bit of meditation because I've got this space to do it uninterrupted. And so I went into the bedroom and, just was thinking I'd do an hour or two. But what happened is I just dropped into this really deep meditation and went to this place that was like, I don't know if you've heard of the Akashic Records.
Yes.
That's sort of all the information is stored there.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the Akashic Records, but it was in that dimension.
Yeah.
In that plane. So there's like the physical, there's the astral, and then there's this dimension where all this information is stored. And so in this place, there was a place there, not the Akashic Records, but another place in that dimension, in that frequency, sort of like council rooms. I don't know what to call them. Yeah. But I was able to go there, and from that place, I was able to just, because I was working with all these plants in the book with the research, and I just said, do any of you want to contribute anything to the book? And then they sort of just came like one by one, and some would turn up with like words, some would like show me stuff with pictures, and they just communicated to me what they wanted to put in the book. And I just sort of leaped up from my meditation and just grabbed, some printer paper out of her printer and just, a first pen I could find, and just started scribbling it all down. And this process actually went on for like hours, for like 12 hours. And I was just like scribbling all this stuff down, all these key points, and like just filled I've got a photo somewhere of just like these pages just spread out like around my feet and like a big fan, like double-sided, just with all this scribble stuff as it was coming to me. And I think I actually slept in the middle of it. Like I think it was like going on, and then I just like fell asleep for a while and then woke up, and then it was sort of still going on, and then, eventually it stopped. And it was sort of done. And then I remember just going outside, and she had a swimming pool in the backyard, which was really beautiful because it was all just surrounded by big gum trees. And, it was backed onto bushland, and I just like took off all my clothes and went and lay in the pool on my back, and my whole body was just like vibrating and buzzing, and I was just like, ooh, and I was like, oh my God, what just happened?
Yeah.
And it was so intense and sort of magical. And it wasn't until I was actually writing, like transcribing them and writing my notes out onto the computer, that it was like I was reading someone else's work. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because it was just, it had been sort of transmitted so intensely. And even sometimes, because it came in that fashion, sometimes I still look things up in my own book. Like, oh, yeah, what was that again?
Yeah.
But the interesting thing, so that's how that transmission came about.
Incredible.
All that. And then I was like, okay, so, and then I had this fear of putting that in the book, and people like, my mind, my ego started to come in afterwards when I was like, oh, okay, I should put this. When it was happening, when it had first happened, there was like no doubt. I knew it was to go in the book. But then as I came back to my everyday mind, my everyday ego, then the fear came up about using it and, trusting myself and, but then as soon as I would go into that fear and self-doubt, the message was very clear that it was like, this has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
Get out of the way. This is not about you. This is about the plants and the people out there. And, you have no right to sort of stop the process like you think you are sort of thing.
Yeah.
Sort of quite frank chastisement whenever I went into that. But the same thing, like I actually didn't look at anyone else's flower essence work on those plants for months and months afterwards, because I didn't want that doubt to creep in. Like I just need to trust what I've been given until it was like written out in the manuscript. I sort of was sharing the manuscript with editors and stuff like that. It wasn't until that point, when I was too far in to pull that material out or second guess it, that I went, okay, now I'm going to look up, other people's work on that and see what they say. And then again finding like, that actually correlates really well. It actually correlates perfectly. So exactly the same experience. Like I had to really trust that what I was receiving was, where it was coming from, and not allow my ego and my doubt to second guess that. And of course, it was spot on, and it was my own beautiful spin, but the core energetics were just really consistent a lot around a lot of other people's work that I read subsequently after that. So so it's funny, like, I had the same process that you had.
A quick note: if you are a creative, an entrepreneur, or someone with a deep passion or vision that you would like to expand into, if you know your potential and are desiring to transmute your fears into fuel for fulfilling it, if you want to learn more about yourself so that your relationships can feel expansive and easeful, and if this episode is stirring something within you, I want to share with you that I offer one-to-one mentoring packages where we will explore flower essences and using them to harness and harmonize your vision and creativity. Drawing upon all I have navigated and learned from working in the creative industries for a decade, to creating deep relationships with the flowers, alchemizing my own fears, blind spots, and roadblocks, I have curated these 3-month packages to offer you deep healing, growth, and tangible resources to tap into your personal and creative evolution. Again, if this is stirring something within you that is calling to be tapped into, you can book a connection call or sign up for the Beauty Way packages via the link in the show notes, or by heading to hekahealing.com.au/thebeautyway. I look forward to sharing the flower medicine with you.
And I mean, you're just, because while Gotu-Kola in particular has like a very like kind of traditional sort of like story and properties attached to it, I feel like before then I couldn't really like gain a lot of clarity around its sort of energetic and emotional sort of actions and world, and so which I guess contributed to me not really having an understanding before I used that flower essence. I just knew that it was for me, and like so your stuff was probably the most in-depth, I would say, qualities that I could draw on from anywhere about its energetic actions. And they were, like I said, were just so spot on. So definitely, like, obviously you were meant to share all of that transmission within that book. I think it's a really beautiful offering you've created in that book, combining like such sort of like scientific aspects with, and all of the information and resources with the energetic. It's just, a beautiful offering. So that's fascinating to hear the story behind it all. But I think you are obviously meant to include that side of it in there for sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting journey. So yeah, I thank Tulsi. Obviously, Tulsi is one of my allies.
Absolutely.
So she had a big role in bringing that forth as well. Yeah.
So good. I love it. So you obviously worked with the Tulsi flower essence among that sort of, well, you didn't actually work with it, but you did.
Exactly.
And this is the thing, right? It's like, it's kind of like that when you work with the natural world and with the plants and the flowers, it's like all about that releasing the control of how we think it's meant to unfold and how going back to what we think because we've been told this way, what has to happen, we have to, actually take the tincture or whatever it is to have this effect. And it's like, no, like the nature's obviously always working for us. So why would it be any different? And it's like that total release of control of how it's all meant to unfold.
Yeah, I have so many experience of that.
Absolutely. So you obviously worked with the Tulsi flower essence within that realm, and that brought a sort of big kind of unfolding for you. Are there any other experiences in particular with flower essences that you could speak to that have been sort of instrumental in your work? Or even if there's like any sort of flower essences that are really sort of staples that you yourself use or have in the past used with clients. I
don't know that I have staples as such. I kind of, it's always evolved. Oh, maybe Tulsi is one. Rose is another one actually that I have used quite a bit. I think Rose for that real connection to self and source. And I had a really beautiful experience with Rose. And I think this is really interesting because when I was doing the plant spirit healing course with Pam, and we did Rose on that course, and when I was doing the meditation to connect with Rose, when I first contacted Rose, it was such like just this brilliant blinding light, and it was so strong and intense that it was actually almost a bit frightening and overwhelming. Like I couldn't like almost relate to it because I was just like so dazzled and overwhelmed by it. And I actually said, this is too much. Can you show me another form that I can work with more easily? And then it softened into this sort of beautiful, more humanoid sort of form, just in order for me to work with it. And I think that Rose has this, and I felt that was really, I just wanted to mention that to illustrate to people that the plants will show up for you in ways that you can work with them. And also I think people have a real fear around when they're working energetically with plants around the role of the imagination. And I just wanted to speak to that for a moment, how important the imagination is in the realm of working energetically with plants or with anything, because we have our consciousness and the plant has its consciousness, but all we're dealing with actually, like, matter is just energy, right? So everything is just energy, like various densities of energy. And so when you're working in the realm of energetics, all you're dealing with really are frequencies. And so it's really useful as a human to let our imagination come in and give form to those frequencies, because then they become much more accessible to us. And that doesn't mean that you're making stuff up. It just means that you're giving it a usable form. And so I often say to students when I'm teaching flower essences or energetic things, just allow the images to unfold and don't get attached to them. And people say, oh, but how do I know if it's real or not? And the way you know that it's real or not is because there will be an effect. You will feel something, you will see something, something will happen in your life, like something real will actually happen if it's real. You know what I mean? There will be a change in your body, there'll be a change in your psyche, there'll be a synchronicitous event. And that's how you know it's real. What is going on in your mind or your imagination is irrelevant. You'll know it's real because there will be a real effect. And so allowing that, those images and those forms that come up in the mind and in the imagination, the more you allow them, the deeper the journey they can take you on. So not to hold back on that. And at the same time, I know a lot of people say to me, oh, I don't get those images. I don't get images, and they feel like they're missing out because maybe they're not sensing energetic stuff in visual ways. And, some people are just more auditory. Maybe it'll be like voices in their head, but with a quality that is slightly different than their own voice in their head. Or other people don't get the auditory or the visual stuff, and they just get more felt sensations. So I say to those people, we'll just tune into those sensations. Is it hot or cold or warm or buzzing or prickling, or just work with the sensations that are coming up in the physical body, or or the intuition in your gut or something like that. So I think, I don't know, maybe I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there, but I don't have each plant, I think, comes in at a different time in a different way for its own purpose. And what's been happening lately has been really interesting, because I think after writing the last book, I sort of was just so exhausted from that process. And I also went through a phase where I think I'd been doing this body of work, with wildcraft, and a lot of the stuff from wildcraft went into this second book, and then all the additional recipes and stuff. And this second book was kind of like the full form that I'd envisioned from the beginning, and it just felt like a really complete body of work. And so I kind of felt in a bit of a way like I'm done with the plants for a minute. I just need to think about something else. I'd been very intensively working on this body of work for over 10 years, and it just kind of felt done, and I wasn't engaging so much with the plant world. But what has been happening over the last few months, which has been really interesting, is people keep contacting me and saying, can you make this essence for me? And they're usually people that I've taught in the past. And I'm like, no, you can do it. I've showed you how to do it. You can do it. Yeah. And they're like, no, I want you to do it. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do it then. And so I've made one. I made a lantana essence for someone who wanted me to do it. And that ended up being this just beautiful process of creating this essence in a way that was really new to me as well. I bought in a rose quartz crystal and this number, I had this really strong intuitive sense to bring in a number 33. And so I did the stirring. I stirred it 33 times one way, 33 times the other way, and put this 33 energy frequency into that essence as well. And even with the dosage, which I usually do 4 or 7 drops, but this one was all about 3s and multiples of 3. So it was 3 drops 3 times a day. So there was yeah, so that was just really interesting, this lantana essence, this protection essence, that was, that I sort of was called to make, and then it came about in this really beautiful full way, and people have been having really lovely experiences with that essence, that I've been getting feedback from a few people with that essence. And then another one that I'm in the process of making at the moment. And when I say I'm in the process of making, because sometimes you make an essence just spontaneous, like you see a flower and you go, I'm just going to make this essence, boom, and you just make it. But sometimes making the essence is just like the final step in a long period of working with those plants before you actually even put a plant in water.
Yeah.
So another friend of mine contacted me and said could I make them an essence for a father wound, I think is such a fundamental thing on the planet. So many people with father issues doing it, one for mother issues. But and I was like, I'll try. I said, but I don't know if I've got, I said it might take a little while because I'm not really in plant mode at the moment. So I don't know, like I have to just wait till it comes to me, like I can't force it. Yeah. So I was like, I don't know when it's going to come. Like I'm just going to have to sit with it until the plants turn up. Yeah. But they actually turned up really quickly. And it was Gotu-Kola. So that's in there. Because of, all this karmic influence and the lineage stuff. Yeah. And then the other plant was broadleaf plantain, which is, very much about male authority and understanding benevolent male authority and dealing with reactions to male authority that has not felt harmonious, and that desire to rebel or lash out, or some of those things that you can get into those dynamics with that push pull with father figures, and then the other plant is amaranth, and I really wanted to use this, which is the plant of abundance, because I think often, and it's, I am enough, I have enough, I do enough, because I think when there's father wounds there, often the belief or the imprint is that I'm not enough, or that, there's, patterns of lack that play out throughout life, or patterns of, feeling inferior or whatever, because maybe your self-esteem wasn't, nurtured by that key authority figure. And, so you've got to, there's always this part of you that feels like something's, wrong with you, you're not enough. So amaranth is really to address that lack and that not enough wounding. So those three, I've been working with over the past month or so, preparing. I haven't actually physically made the essence yet, but I've been sort of just, meditating with that a bit and receiving any insight and guidance. And it's interesting what comes into my space too. Like I was just at Herb Fest the other week, and beautiful friend of mine, Twiggy, came down from southeast Queensland and did this whole big workshop on broadleaf plantain. Wow. And, so, plantain has really showed up, in my space. And I was just watching this documentary the other night on Yogananda, who wrote autobiography of a yogi, and one of his teachers in that lineage is Mahavatar Babaji, And I was like, Babaji. And then I was like, I feel like there's something maybe with Babaji in this father essence as well. And so just all these, just allowing all these influences to sort of unfold and germinate. And then when I come to make this essence, to just bring in what needs to be present with that essence at that time for it to be ready to go out into the world. And so, I was just saying to my sister, I was like, it's funny, like I feel like at the moment, more than anything, just, a conduit, I guess, like people are just working through me at the moment. It's like, I don't want to do it anymore. It's like, all right, I'll just, they can tell me what I need to make, and then the plants and the things can do the making, and I'll just facilitate like a secretary or something.
Absolutely. And it's just really going back to that, like allowing them to guide you where you need to go without any control of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful. Oh, I really I look forward to when you bring that essence to fruition. I think, like you said, that father sort of wound and realm is so prevalent with everyone these days. So the father wound is just I'm seeing it so much, and I think, it's just so needed right now. So I think what you're creating with that is going to be profound. And it's funny because, I use my Australian Bushfire Essence cards and all the time. And I pulled a card before this, and the one that came out was Boab, which is, clearing the family patterning and the karmic patterns, and all that we take down from our lineage. So, interesting.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Boab, I think it's a bit similar to Gotu-Kola in some ways, I think.
Yeah.
They both have that sort of real ancestral clearing sort of energy to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I think the father essence even just plays in on a global level, with our sort of the patriarchy and the whole, structure of society. I think there's a real, there's a personal level to this essence, but I think there's also a societal level to this essence as well. And likewise, I think when I come to do the mother one, which I'm not focusing as much on because I really want calendula to be in the mother one. And so I'm waiting till the calendula starts flowering.
I just planted some last week.
Yeah. So I'll journey with that one more towards the summer. But even, and I think, they're quite different. I think the father one is very much about society and identity well, not so much identity. It's more about like sort of self-esteem, I think, in some ways, and feeling enough, like I mentioned, and how we respond to men or to authority. Is that one. Whereas I think with the mother essence, I think there's a lot of anger that shows up in the father wound, and a lot of, whereas I feel like with the mother wound, it's actually more grief. I think when things go bad with your mother, it's incredibly painful in a really, like a loss, like it's this deep loss and sadness, whereas issues, and I think obviously people can feel that loss with fathers as well, but I think collectively there's more anger that comes into that essence. I think I'm really excited about the mother and father essence.
That would be great.
With at the moment. So, so they're, and that's the other thing too. Like I think a lot of people who work with essences have a really specific way that they make their essences.
Yeah.
Whereas I find that my essence making tends to be quite intuitive. Like I make essences in quite a variety of different ways.
Yeah.
One of my favorite essences that I made was a nasturtium essence.
Oh, beautiful.
That I actually made that at Belbunya on one of my courses, and we made it as a living essence because there's, it's a low growing plant, or there's all flowers everywhere. We just put the bowl of spring water under the flowers, and then we just placed the flowers in, but we didn't pick them. So they were all still connected to the plant. And then what happened that day was we left them in the sun for the day, but there was like a thunderstorm came past. And so there was like thunder and lightning and a big downpour, and that all went into the essence. And then the sun came out again, like it was sun, thunder, lightning, rain, then sun again. And nasturtium, the quality of nasturtium essence is like ignite, like when you feel life has lost its spark and you've lost motivation and you've lost direction and you've lost your passion. And so nasturtium really brings that spark back. And so that little thunderstorm just went past and literally put that energy of the thunder and the lightning and that rain into that essence, and it was one of the most potent and most exciting essences that I think I've ever made, because of the live plants, the rain, and all the elements went into it. And I just loved that essence so much. And so they all just have their own little story and their own way of being made, and they're all quite unique, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that. And I've spoken about this on the podcast before a little bit, and with this, like, not being too rigid or strict in this way of creating the essence, because it's meant to sort of unfold with what it needs, at that time, and how it's meant to unfold. And there's been, definitely been like a few times where I'll leave my essence out and then it rains and has a storm, or like sometimes I've even left it and completely forgotten about it overnight. And I'm like, like that, it needed that, it needed the moon, it needed the stars. You just got to roll with it, because that's it. And trust. It's all coming back again to that theme of like just trusting that it's all unfolding exactly how it should, because that's what nature does.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Well, I would love to ask you one last question today. So if you feel called, could you share one thing that you believe the plant world and nature would like the collective to know right now?
Yeah. So I think this is a really beautiful question. And I think really what the plants show me just consistently all the time is just they are so loving, and that they love us. They're here for us. They 100% have our backs. All we need to do is show them the slightest bit of attention and they will just turn up in abundance. And to just trust that, like literally all our food, all our medicine is here all around us. Everything we need in this physical existence is here, provided for us by the plants. And they are just they love us, they love us, they have our backs, and to just trust that. Trust that. And I think, it's such a big thing right now, I think, with the world and everything that's happening in it, to try and find a way to regain our trust in the natural world. But anyone can sit with any plant for for any length of time and you'll just start to receive gifts. It's just inevitable.
Yeah.
So just know that. A beautiful story that shows an example of this is when Wildcraft first came out. A woman came and told me this story after she'd read the spirit part about cobbler's pegs. Her husband had just passed away in an accident, and they had a big property, and she'd been looking out the back of her property and it was covered in weeds and cobbler's pegs. And she was like, oh, I have to go and mow the field and, do all this work. And she was grieving and she was so overwhelmed, and it just, everything felt so overwhelming. And after she read the book, and then she went out to make breakfast the next morning and looked out the window and saw this field of cobbler's pegs. And instead of seeing this work, like, because cobbler's pegs is all about like perseverance and you've got this almost like cheerleaders. And instead of seeing this field of like burden and work, she saw this whole field saying like, we've got you, you can do this, you're going to be okay. We're here, we're supporting you. Don't give up, like we've got you. And so like once she knew that that's the message that they were bringing, it's like the whole paradigm just completely shifted and inverted. And instead of feeling burdened, it was like there was this whole field of love and support there for her, all just saying, don't give up, keep going, you've got this. So, that's when we understand what the plants are bringing, literally like looking out onto a field of weeds or walking around the block or sitting in our backyard, all of a sudden we have these messengers who are just, helping us get through our day or our life or whatever. So just know that you are loved. That's the message.
That is beautiful. I love that. Yeah, thank you. That was beautiful to end on. Oh, Heidi, this has been so amazing. I've loved hearing about your story. You've got so much wisdom and so much, just knowledge and history to share. So thank you. Thank you for coming on and sharing it with the audience.
Welcome. Yeah. It's been lovely to be here and lovely talking to you. And hopefully we get a chance to work together again.
Absolutely. And if anyone would like to find your offerings and also your new book that's about to come out, where can they do that?
So my website is heidimerika.com.au. And Facebook and Instagram are both just at Heidi Merika. And Merika. So
I'll put
it's all there. There's a link on my website for the new book. The new book will be in all the bookshops. So after September 3rd, you'll be able to get it from all the bookshops around the place. If you want to pre-order, you can pre-order on the website through the link there. There's a link on my Instagram to pre-order the book as well. So
amazing. I look forward to getting my hands on a copy as well.
And my Substack, lots of stuff goes into my Substack. It's Heidi Merika at Substack. The Wild World with Heidi Merika is my Substack, and that's my weekly newsletter where I'm running a series, the Wildcraft series, where each month we do one plant, and I do like plant ID videos and like a herbal monograph and then recipes. And then I've just started this month doing some lives as well where we, can do some live chats. So
amazing. Oh, incredible. Thank you so much.
It's only $8 a month for paid subscribers. And then free subscribers just get like my newsletter with updates of courses and events. And flower essences and stuff up there when they're ready. And
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Heidi. And thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you loved this conversation. I definitely did. So yeah, check out Heidi in the links below, and we'll see you next week.